Happy birthday to me, I whispered bitterly, staring at the half-empty glass of expensive cabernet in front of me. The restaurant lights dimmed around us, casting dramatic shadows across the white tablecloth where my husband Ryan's hand still rested, his fingers intertwined with hers. Not mine. Hers. The woman he'd introduced as Vanessa, my associate from the dealership. The woman whose perfume I'd smelled on his collar 3 weeks ago and convinced myself was just from a customer. The woman now wearing the emerald bracelet I'd pointed out in a jewelry store window last month when Ryan asked what I might want for my birthday. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have known something was wrong when Ryan insisted on this particular restaurant, Bellini's, downtown's most exclusive Italian eatery, for my 35th birthday dinner. In our 12 years of marriage, he'd never planned my birthday, without gentle reminders and suggestions. Yet here we were, at a table he'd reserved weeks in advance, with a woman whose nervous smile couldn't quite disguise the intimate glances she kept sharing with my husband. Sophie, Ryan's voice cut through my thoughts, too cheerful by half. I was just telling Vanessa about how you've been wanting to go back to school for that interior design program. She actually has a friend who teaches at the institute. I looked up, meeting Vanessa's eyes for the first time since she'd commented on my understated dress 20 minutes earlier. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, willowy, with perfect hair that somehow looked effortlessly styled. Her blazer probably cost more than our mortgage payment. Our mortgage. On the house I'd spent 3 years renovating while Ryan built his luxury car dealership, the business I'd helped him start with my inheritance from my grandmother. How fortunate, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Though I'm not sure when I'd have time for school. Running the books for Ryan's business keeps me quite busy. I saw the flicker of surprise cross Vanessa's face. Clearly, she hadn't been told I was the financial backbone of Emerald City Motors. The waiter appeared with our entrees, placing an extravagant seafood pasta in front of Ryan, a delicate risotto before Vanessa, and my chicken parmesan last. As he described the chef's special birthday dessert they'd prepared for later, I noticed Ryan checking his phone under the table, a small smile playing on his lips. Another text from her, no doubt, even though she sat right across from him. I excused myself to the restroom, legs unsteady as I navigated through the tables of happy diners, celebrating ordinary evenings that hadn't imploded into absurdist theater. In the elegant marble bathroom, I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at my reflection. My carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the shock in my eyes or the betrayal written across my face. My phone buzzed in my purse. My best friend Tara. How's the birthday dinner? Did he get you something good this year? I started typing, deleted it, then started again. He brought his girlfriend. Not joking. Need you to come get me. Her response was immediate. What? On my way. 15 minutes. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick with trembling hands, and straightened my shoulders. 12 years of marriage deserved at least the dignity of walking out with my head held high. As I returned to the table, I saw Ryan and Vanessa huddled close, his hand now on her thigh beneath the table. They sprang apart when they noticed me approaching, but not quickly enough. I'm not feeling well, I announced, reaching for my purse. I've called Tara to pick me up. Ryan's face contorted into a mask of concern that might have fooled me a month ago. Sophie, you barely touched your food. At least have your birthday dessert before. I think we all know this dinner isn't about celebrating my birthday. I cut him off, surprised by the steel in my voice. Enjoy your evening, both of you. Vanessa had the decency to look uncomfortable, but Ryan's expression hardened. You're overreacting. Vanessa is an important business contact. This is about networking. I laughed then, a sharp sound that drew glances from nearby tables. Is that what we're calling it now? Networking? I nodded toward the emerald bracelet on her wrist. Nice networking gift, by the way. Green always was your color, I said to Vanessa, who flushed deep red. As I turned to leave, Ryan grabbed my wrist. Don't make a scene, Sophie. We can talk about this at home. I gently but firmly removed his hand. There's a difference between making a scene and maintaining my dignity. I'm choosing the latter. And Ryan, don't wait up. The cool evening air hit me as I pushed through the restaurant doors, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. My birthday dinner. He couldn't even wait until tomorrow to parade his mistress in front of me. The absolute humiliation burned through my shock, setting something alight inside me, something that felt dangerously close to a reckoning. Tara's SUV screeched to a halt at the curb and I climbed in, collapsing into the passenger seat. Tell me everything and don't leave out a single detail, she demanded, pulling away from the restaurant. And also tell me which of his precious cars we're keying first. That's when I remembered. The cars. Ryan's beloved collection of vintage and luxury vehicles, housed in the climate-controlled garage he'd built with the business loan I'd co-signed. The collection worth more than our house. The collection whose documentation and insurance papers were all in my office filing cabinet because you're so much better with paperwork than me, Soph. A plan began to form in my mind, something far more substantial than scratching paint. Take me to your place, I said, wiping away tears. I need a clear head to figure this out, and access to someone who knows vehicle export laws. Tara shot me a sideways glance, a slow smile spreading across her face. Now that's the Sophie I know. Screw getting even. We're getting ahead. The digital clock on Tara's dashboard blinked. 8:42 p.m. In just under an hour, my life had completely unraveled. But as we drove through the city lights toward whatever came next, I realized something important. While Ryan might have brought his girlfriend to my birthday dinner, I still had the keys to his kingdom, and I was about to change the locks. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 20 minutes later, we were sitting on Tara's couch, a bottle of tequila between us as I recounted every excruciating detail of the dinner. How Ryan had suggested I wear something casual while he arrived in his best suit. How Vanessa kept touching her bracelet. My bracelet. While talking about their recent business trip to Los Angeles. A trip where Ryan had claimed he was meeting with exclusive car collectors, too busy for evening phone calls. He called her his associate, I said, knocking back another shot. His associate who just happens to wear the exact bracelet I wanted. For my birthday. Tara refilled our glasses, her expression thunderous. 12 years, Soph. 12 years you've supported that man's dreams. You helped him build that business from nothing. With my grandmother's inheritance, I added, the familiar grief of losing her mixing with this fresh betrayal. Gran had left me $300,000 with a letter explaining she wanted me to build something beautiful with it. Instead, I'd built Ryan's dream, Emerald City Motors, now the premier luxury car dealership in Seattle. And you keep their books, handle their accounting, manage the payroll, Tara continued, counting on her fingers. All while running the administrative side from your home office for what? A third of what he pays his sales manager? I nodded, a new realization dawning. Because we're partners. Because it's our business. At least, that's what he always said. Tara grabbed her laptop. Let's find out exactly what the paperwork says. Is your name on the business documents? Of course. I'm listed as Chief Financial Officer officially, though Ryan always introduces me as the bookkeeper. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my Files app where I kept digital copies of all our important documents. I also have signature authority on all the business accounts. Ryan hates dealing with banks. Tara paused her typing. And the car collection? The ones he keeps in that special garage? Technically, they're business assets, part of the dealership's heritage collection for tax purposes. But 3 of them are exclusively in my name because of some insurance requirement. About multiple owners. I stopped, memory clicking into place. Including the 1965 Shelby Cobra he bought last year, the one worth nearly $1 million. The blue one he wouldn't even let you sit in, Tara asked incredulously. That's the one, said my perfume. Might damage the original leather. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ryan had protected his car from my perfume while wearing another woman's scent to my birthday dinner. Tara turned her laptop toward me, showing a private browser window. My cousin, Damon, works for that exotic car export company I told you about. The one that ships luxury vehicles to collectors overseas. Want me to give him a call? I hesitated, sobriety cutting through my anger for a moment. I can't just sell Ryan's cars out from under him. That would be… What? Illegal? Not if they're in your name. Immoral? Like bringing his side piece to your birthday dinner? Tara raised an eyebrow. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sleeping in separate bedrooms for the past 3 months, all those late nights at the dealership, the decreased intimacy. Sophie, how long has this been going on while you kept his business running? My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Where are you? We need to talk about your behavior tonight. Coming home soon? My behavior, as if I were the one who had shattered our marriage vows, paraded a lover in public, humiliated my spouse on their birthday. I looked up at Tara, resolve hardening. Call your cousin. I don't want to do anything illegal, but I want to understand my options. She grinned, already dialing. That's all I'm suggesting. Just a conversation about options. As Tara spoke with Damon, setting up a meeting for tomorrow morning, I scrolled through photos on my phone. Happy memories of vacations, dinner parties, family gatherings. Ryan and I smiling, always smiling. When had it become a mask? When had… He started looking at me and seeing an obstacle rather than a partner? My thumb stopped on a photo from last Christmas. Ryan standing proudly beside the blue Shelby Cobra, arm around my shoulders. I remembered how he'd said, "This beauty is our future, Soph. In 20 years, it'll be worth twice what we paid. Our retirement plan. Our future, our retirement, our business." But Vanessa was wearing my bracelet, and Ryan hadn't come after me when I walked out of the restaurant. I opened my email and began composing a message to myself, listing every car in the collection, every account number, every password I managed for our shared digital lives. By the time I finished, Tara was off the phone, looking pleased. Damon can meet us at his office tomorrow at 9 a.m. He says that with the right documentation, there are many legal options for liquidating vehicle assets, especially with international buyers who pay premium prices. Good, I said, sending the email and setting my phone aside. Because I'm not just looking at the cars anymore. Ryan doesn't realize it, but I've been running more than just the books for Emerald City Motors. I've been running everything except the sales floor. Meaning? Tara asked. Meaning I know things about our business that even Ryan doesn't fully understand. Like how I've been quietly building our international client list. Or how I restructured our financing last year to improve our credit rating. I accepted the glass of water Tara offered, my mind clearing as determination replaced shock. He's about to learn exactly how valuable I've been all these years. That's the spirit, Tara said, sitting beside me. So what's the plan? I stared at the city lights visible through her apartment window, the Seattle skyline bright against the night sky. First, we meet with Damon. Then I pay a visit to our attorney, without Ryan. After that, I smiled, feeling the weight of my wedding ring on my finger. After that, I start writing my own story instead of supporting his. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The next morning came with a pounding headache and 6 missed calls from Ryan. I'd silenced my phone after his third message, each one progressively angrier than the last, culminating in, "You're embarrassing yourself. Vanessa is important to the business. Stop acting like a jealous teenager and come home." Jealous teenager? As if my reaction to finding my husband with another woman was immature rather than completely justified. Tara handed me a steaming mug of coffee and her phone. "You should see this. He's been texting me too." Ryan's message to Tara was all concern and manipulation. "Tara, please tell Sophie I'm worried. She's overreacting to a business dinner and making assumptions that could damage our marriage. If she's with you, tell her to come home so we can talk like adults." "Like adults," I repeated, handing the phone back to Tara. Interesting approach from a man who couldn't adult his way through telling his wife he wanted someone else. We arrived at Damon's office 15 minutes early. The export company occupied the ground floor of a sleek building in the financial district, its reception area decorated with photos of exotic cars being loaded into shipping containers and delivered to mansions around the world. Damon turned out to be younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with an expensive haircut and the relaxed confidence of someone who regularly handles million-dollar transactions. He ushered us into his office, offering espresso from a machine that probably cost more than my first car. "So, Tara tells me you're exploring options for liquidating a significant vehicle collection," he said, getting straight to business. "Private? Collector pieces or dealer inventory?" "Both," I replied, opening my portfolio. "I'm CFO of Emerald City Motors. We maintain a heritage collection of 16 vehicles, 3 of which are titled exclusively in my name. The others are business assets of the dealership." I spread out the paperwork, title documents, insurance policies, recent professional appraisals. Damon's eyes widened slightly as he scanned the list. "This is impressive. The 65 Cobra alone, original, matching numbers, fewer than 30,000 miles. That's easily a 7-figure asset in today's market. And the Ferrari Dino." He looked up at me. "You're sitting on nearly 4 million in vehicles. Here. May I ask why you're looking to liquidate so suddenly?" I met his gaze steadily. "Let's just say my business partner and I are heading in different directions. I need to understand my options before having a difficult conversation." Damon nodded, asking no further personal questions. "For the vehicles titled in your name, the process is straightforward. We can arrange for discreet transportation, handle export documentation, and connect you with our network of international buyers. The dealership inventory is more complex. You'd need proper corporate authorization depending on your bylaws. I have signatory authority on all business accounts and assets," I explained, showing him the relevant documents. "And as CFO, I'm authorized to make inventory decisions up to $5 million without secondary approval." Damon's eyebrows rose. "That's unusual for a dealership. My husband prefers to focus on sales and acquisitions. I handle the financial and legal aspects." The irony wasn't lost on me. Ryan's hatred of paperwork had given me the very power I now needed. "Well, in that case," Damon said, "we could move quickly on this. I have a client in Dubai who's been looking for an original Cobra for his collection, and several buyers in Singapore and Hong Kong interested in vintage European models. With the proper documentation, we could have offers by the end of the week." "How quickly could the vehicles be moved?" I asked, thinking of the security cameras Ryan had installed at the garage. "For high-value assets like these, we can arrange transport within 48 hours once terms are agreed upon. We handle everything: specialized loading, shipping insurance, export compliance." Damon smiled professionally. "Our service is designed for clients who value efficiency and discretion." As we discussed specifics, I felt a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine after years of pouring myself into a business and a marriage where I'd been undervalued. I'd like to move forward with evaluations on all 3 vehicles. In my name, I decided. And I'll need a day or 2 to review the corporate documentation before we discuss the others. Damon nodded, clearly pleased. I'll schedule our transport team for preliminary inspections. Where are the vehicles currently housed? A private garage facility near the dealership, I replied. I have full access, but I'd prefer the inspections. Happen tomorrow between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. When Ryan would be hosting a VIP client lunch across town, an event I had scheduled and confirmed just last week. After finalizing details with Damon, Tara and I headed to our next appointment, the offices of Winterbrook and Associates, the law firm that had handled both our business formation and our prenuptial agreement 12 years ago. Are you sure about this? Tara asked as we rode the elevator to the 17th floor. Once you start this process. I'm sure, I said firmly. Ryan made his choice at Bellini's last night. I'm making mine today. Michelle Winterbrook welcomed me warmly, though her expression turned serious when I explained I was there without Ryan. In her elegant corner office with views of Puget Sound, I laid out the situation in clinical terms, keeping my emotions carefully controlled. So you believe your husband is having an affair with a dealership employee, and you want to understand your options regarding both the business and your marriage, she summarized, making notes. Yes. But before we discuss divorce possibilities, I need clarity on the business structure. Ryan and I started Emerald City Motors with my inheritance. Over time, we've expanded significantly, but I've remained CFO while taking on additional operational responsibilities. Michelle pulled up our files on her computer. According to our records, you and Ryan are equal partners in the LLC, though profit distributions have been set at 70-30 in his favor since 2019. That amendment was signed by both of you. I nodded, remembering the conversation. Ryan had argued he deserved the larger share because he was the face of the business and worked longer hours on the sales floor. I'd agreed, not realizing I was devaluing my own behind-the-scenes contributions. And the prenuptial agreement? Michelle grimaced slightly. It's not ideal given the current circumstances. You agreed that in the event of divorce, business assets would remain with the managing partner, defined in the agreement as Ryan. You would be entitled to a payout of 25% of the assessed business value at the time of separation. My stomach tightened. 25%. After I'd invested my inheritance, worked countless hours building systems and processes, managed every financial aspect for 12 years. Ryan would keep the business we'd built together, and I'd get a quarter of its value. However, Michelle continued, studying the document more closely, there's an infidelity clause that neither of you probably paid much attention to at the time. In case of proven infidelity, the division becomes 50-50, and managing partner status can be contested. A small ray of hope. And how would infidelity be proven legally? Text messages, emails, witness statements, credit card receipts for gifts or hotel rooms. Michelle looked up at me. Do you have any evidence beyond seeing them together at dinner? I thought of Ryan's locked phone, how careful he'd always been with his passwords. Then I remembered something that made me smile. The dealership has security cameras covering every area, including Ryan's office. As CFO, I have access to the security footage for insurance and compliance purposes. I pulled out my phone, opening the security app I rarely used. And Vanessa has been Ryan's associate for 6 months now. Michelle's expression shifted to one of professional appreciation. That would certainly qualify as evidence. Now, regarding the vehicles you mentioned, the ones titled in your name, those are clearly your separate property, regardless of the prenuptial terms. As we continued discussing strategies and next steps, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I hadn't realized how much I'd compromised over the years, how gradually I'd accepted less than I deserved in both my marriage and business partnership. By the time we left Michelle's office 2 hours later, I had a clear plan and a renewed sense of purpose. Tara squeezed my hand as we waited for the elevator. "You okay?" That was a lot to process. I nodded, surprising myself with how steady I felt. 12 years, and I never once read the security logs for Ryan's office. 12 years, and I accepted a 70-30 split because he told me that's what was fair. The elevator doors opened and we stepped inside. But that's over now. "What's next?" Tara asked. I checked my watch, 2:30 p.m. "Now we go to the dealership. There's something I need from my office." "Are you sure? What if Ryan's there?" "He's with clients until at least 4 o'clock," I said confidently. "And honestly, Tara, I don't care if he is there. It's time I stopped hiding." The familiar glass and steel structure of Emerald City Motors came into view as we turned onto Auto Row. The gleaming showroom displayed the latest models: a Lamborghini Urus, a Bentley Continental GT, a Rolls-Royce Ghost, all positioned under perfect lighting designed to make them even more desirable. I'd helped design this showroom, worked with the architects on the layout, chosen the materials for the customer lounge where wealthy clients sipped espresso while signing paperwork, for vehicles that cost more than most homes. As we pulled into the executive parking area, I noticed Ryan's spot was empty. Good. This would be easier without a confrontation, at least for now. The receptionist looked up in surprise as I entered. "Sophie, we weren't expecting you today. Ryan said you were feeling unwell." "I'm much better now, Melissa. Just need to grab some files from my office." I smiled reassuringly, heading toward the administrative wing where my rarely used official office was located. The space was immaculate. I'd always preferred working from home, but fully functional. Tara followed me in, closing the door behind us. "What are we looking for?" "This," I said, unlocking my filing cabinet and removing a thick folder labeled Vehicle Documentation, Heritage Collection. Inside were the original titles, purchase agreements, and maintenance records for all 16 cars, including detailed provenance documentation for the most valuable ones. "And this," I added, turning to my computer and logging into the dealership's financial system. With a few clicks, I transferred copies of all accounting records, sales histories, and customer databases to my secure cloud storage, information I was legally entitled to as CFO, but that Ryan would undoubtedly try to block me from accessing, once he understood what was happening. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Where are you? We need to talk. Coming home tonight?" No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just the expectation that I would eventually return, ready to sweep everything under the rug. I didn't respond, focusing instead on gathering what I needed. Just as we were preparing to leave, my office door opened, and Melissa appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Sophie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Vanessa is asking if you're available. She said it's important." I exchanged glances with Tara, whose eyebrows had shot up to her hairline. "Tell her I'll be right out," I replied calmly. "Are you sure?" Tara whispered as Melissa left. "You don't have to talk to her." "Actually, I think I do." I squared my shoulders, tucking the folder into my bag. "Wait here. This won't take long." Vanessa was standing awkwardly by the customer lounge, still wearing the emerald bracelet. Up close, in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the dealership rather than the flattering glow of Bellini's, she looked younger than I'd initially thought, maybe late 20s. And nervous. "Sophie," she began, her voice pitched low. "I feel like we got off on the wrong foot last night." I regarded her silently, waiting. "Ryan explained everything to me, how you've been growing apart for months, how you're really more business partners than husband and wife now." She twisted the bracelet around her wrist. "He said you've been sleeping in separate bedrooms since Christmas." That part, at least, was true, though not for the reasons Ryan had apparently given her. I'd moved into the guest room after finding a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket. A receipt for a king room when he'd told me he was at a dealer conference in Portland. I'd convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. "I never meant to hurt you," Vanessa continued, oblivious to my thoughts. "Ryan assured me you two had an understanding." "Did he?" I kept my voice neutral. "And did this understanding include him giving you the bracelet I wanted for my birthday? Or bringing you to my celebration dinner?" She flushed. "The dinner was my idea. I thought. I wanted to meet you properly. Ryan said you were amazingly understanding, that you'd want him to be happy." Understanding. There was that word again, the quality Ryan had always praised in me while taking advantage of it. "Stay at the office late," Sophie understands. "Cancel our anniversary trip for a car auction," Sophie understands. "Sleep with his younger colleague while keeping his wife running his business," Sophie understands. Well, I didn't understand anymore. Or rather, I finally understood too well. "Vanessa," I said gently, "I can see that you believe what Ryan told you, but I think you should know that we don't have an understanding. We don't have an open marriage. And until last night, I had no idea my husband was involved with anyone else. So either Ryan has been lying to you or he's been lying to me. Or both." The color drained from her face. "But he told me you knew about us months ago. That you were just staying together for the business." I smiled sadly. "The business that I helped build with my inheritance? The business where I'm chief financial officer? That business? CFO?" Vanessa looked confused. "Ryan always refers to you as the bookkeeper." "I'm sure he does," I replied, shouldering my bag. "Just like I'm sure he's told you many things about our marriage and about me. Some may even be true, but not the part about me knowing or approving of your relationship." I turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Vanessa. That bracelet you're wearing, the emerald one, I've wanted it for 3 years. Ryan knew that. So when he gives you gifts, just remember, he's not just betraying me, he's deliberately twisting the knife while doing it. Something to consider for your future together." As I walked away, I heard her call after me, her voice smaller now. "Sophie, wait, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." But I kept walking, head high, through the showroom where I'd spent countless hours, past the sales offices where deals were closed on cars I'd helped finance, and out the front doors into the bright afternoon sunlight. Tara was waiting by the car, concern written across her face. "What happened? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, feeling strangely lighter. "I'm better than okay. For the first time in years, I'm seeing everything clearly." I checked my watch. "And we have exactly 19 hours before Damon's team arrives to inspect the cars. Let's make them count." Back at Tara's apartment, I spread the contents of the vehicle documentation folder across her dining table. Each paper represented thousands of dollars, in some cases, hundreds of thousands, that Ryan had spent building his precious collection while telling me we needed to be practical about my desire to renovate our kitchen or take the European vacation I'd been dreaming about for years. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the purchase agreement for the Ferrari Dino. "Ryan bought this 6 months ago for $425,000. The same week he told me we couldn't afford to replace my 10-year-old SUV because business was tight." Tara whistled low. "While you were driving a car with 150,000 miles on it, he was adding to his toy collection?" "It gets better," I continued, flipping through maintenance records. "The garage that houses these cars costs us $8,500 a month in rent, plus another $2,000 for the climate control system and security." I shook my head in disbelief. "That's more than our mortgage payment." As I organized the documents, my phone continued to buzz with messages from Ryan, each one increasingly desperate. "Sophie, this is childish. Come home so we can talk. Then, you're blowing this out of proportion. Vanessa means nothing to me. And finally, I just got a call from Vanessa. What did you say to her? She's threatening to quit. I silenced the phone again, focusing, instead, on creating a detailed inventory of each vehicle, its documentation, and current market value based on recent comparable sales. The tally was staggering. Nearly $7 million in collectible cars, with the Shelby Cobra alone accounting for just under $1 million. Sophie, Tara said quietly, watching me work. What exactly are you planning here? Are you really going to sell all of these cars? I looked up, my thoughts crystallizing into something more strategic than simple revenge. Not all of them, just enough to make sure I get what I deserve from the business I helped build. My laptop pinged with an email notification from Damon. Initial assessment confirms high interest in the 3 vehicles under your name. Transport team confirmed for 10 a.m. tomorrow. Please ensure access to the facility and all documentation. Perfect, I murmured, responding with confirmation and security access codes for the garage. Tara poured us each a glass of wine. So tomorrow you sell the 3 cars in your name. Then what? I took a thoughtful sip. Then I meet with Michelle again to initiate divorce proceedings. The infidelity clause triggers a 50-50 split of our assets, including the business. Ryan will fight it, of course, but between the security, footage from his office, and Vanessa's likely testimony now that she knows she's been lied to, we have solid evidence. And you think he'll just accept that? Tara asked skeptically. No, I admitted. Ryan will do what Ryan always does. Try to charm his way out, then get angry, then attempt to manipulate me into accepting less than I deserve. But this time, I'll be 3 steps ahead. My phone rang again. Not Ryan this time, but a number I didn't recognize. Curious, I answered and put it on speaker. Sophie Walker? A woman's crisp voice came through. Yes, speaking. This is Barbara Winters, Human Resources Director at Emerald City Motors. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I exchanged glances with Tara. Not at all, Barbara. What can I do for you? Well, this is somewhat awkward. We received a directive from Ryan about an hour ago to revoke your system access and building credentials, effective immediately. Since you're listed as CFO, I wanted to verify this request before proceeding. A cold anger washed over me. Ryan was trying to lock me out of the very business I'd helped create. Good thing I'd already downloaded what I needed. I see, I replied, keeping my voice steady. And did Ryan provide any reason for this request? Barbara hesitated. He indicated there was a personal situation that necessitated temporary security measures. However, our corporate bylaws require both partners' approval for executive access changes. Thank you for checking, Barbara. You're right that such changes require dual authorization. I do not approve the request. I paused, then added, also, as CFO, I'll need a complete audit of all executive expenses for the past 12 months delivered to my personal email by tomorrow morning. This should include all corporate credit card statements and reimbursement requests. Of course, Barbara replied, sounding relieved. I'll have that compiled immediately. And regarding your access credentials, they will remain active, I stated firmly. Additionally, I'd like you to note in the system that any further changes to executive access requires my personal authorization with 2-factor verification. After ending the call, Tara stared at me admiringly. That was masterful. You sounded like you were born to run a corporation. I practically have been running one for years, I replied, a new confidence in my voice. Ryan may be the face of Emerald City Motors, but I'm its brain and backbone. It's time he remembered that. My phone buzzed again almost immediately, this time with a text from Ryan. Why did you countermand my HR request? This is my company. I typed back my first response since leaving the restaurant. Our company. My inheritance. Your mistake. Then I turned back to the vehicle documentation. Tomorrow would be busy, and I needed to be prepared. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. No more lying awake wondering where Ryan was when he didn't come home. No more pretending not to notice the distance growing between us. No more diminishing myself to preserve his ego. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity, while Tara made coffee. I checked my email to find Barbara had delivered the requested expense audit. It was even more damning than I'd anticipated. Ryan had been charging personal expenses to the company for years. Restaurants, hotels, gifts, including several charges at high-end jewelry stores that had never resulted in gifts for me. The emerald bracelet now adorning Vanessa's wrist had been purchased on the corporate American Express, classified as a client appreciation gift. He bought her jewelry with company money, I told Tara, forwarding the relevant records to Michelle Winterbrook. And look at this, 2 weekend stays at the Olympic Hotel downtown when he told me he was at dealer conferences. Downtown? Tara echoed. 5 miles from your house? That's both sleazy and lazy. I was about to respond when my phone rang. Damon. Good morning, Sophie. Our transport team is en route to the garage facility. Any hiccups on your end? None at all, I replied, gathering my files. I'll meet them there at 10 as planned. Tara insisted on driving me to the garage, concerned that I might encounter Ryan. The facility was located in an industrial area south of downtown, a nondescript building that gave no indication of the millions of dollars worth of automobiles stored inside. As we pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Damon standing beside 2 professional-looking men in uniform beside a specialized transport truck with the logo of his export company emblazoned on the side. Right on time, he greeted me, shaking my hand. These are our transport specialists, Carlos and Marcus. They'll handle the vehicle inspections and loading process. I unlocked the building and disabled the alarm system, leading them into the climate-controlled interior. The lights automatically illuminated as we entered, revealing 16 automotive masterpieces arranged in 2 neat rows. Each car gleamed under the specialized lighting, from the muscular silhouette of the Shelby Cobra to the elegant curves of the Ferrari Dino and the stately presence of the vintage Aston Martin. Impressive collection, Carlos commented professionally, already circling the Cobra with an appraiser's eye. These 3, I indicated, pointing to the vehicles titled in my name. The blue Cobra, the red Ferrari, and the silver Aston Martin. Damon nodded, checking the VINs against his documentation. Perfect. Carlos and Marcus will complete a detailed condition report on each, then secure them for transport to our facility. From there, we'll arrange professional photography and listing, details for our international clients. As they began their work, my phone rang again. Ryan. For the first time since the birthday dinner, I decided to answer. Where are you? He demanded without preamble. I just drove by Tara's and your car isn't there. Hello to you too, Ryan, I replied calmly, stepping outside the garage for privacy. Don't play games, Sophie. We need to talk about what happened with Vanessa. She's threatening to quit, and we're in the middle of the Robertson deal. Do you have any idea how much commission is at stake? Interesting that your first concern is the commission, not the fact that you brought your girlfriend to my birthday dinner. She's not my... He stopped himself. Look, I admit, it was inappropriate. To invite Vanessa to dinner, I made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated flatly. Like the mistake of buying her the bracelet I wanted for my birthday? Or the mistake of charging it to the company card and classifying it as a client gift? Silence stretched for several seconds. How do you know about that? He finally asked, his voice tighter. I'm the CFO, Ryan. I know everything about our company finances, including your weekend conferences at the Olympic Hotel 5 miles from our house. Another long pause. Where are you right now, Sophie? His tone had shifted from demanding to cautious. taking care of some business. What kind of business? I watched through the garage window as Carlos and Marcus carefully examined the Cobra's engine. The kind that ensures I get what I deserve after 12 years of partnership. What does that mean? Alarm crept into his voice. Sophie, what are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago, valuing myself properly. I ended the call and turned off my phone, not wanting any more interruptions. Back inside, the inspection was progressing efficiently. Each vehicle was documented with photographs, mechanical assessments, and detailed notes on condition and provenance. These are all exceptional examples, Damon informed me. The Cobra in particular is museum quality. With its documented race history and original components, it should command top dollar in today's market. I nodded, running my hand along the Cobra's sleek fender. This car had been Ryan's pride and joy, the centerpiece of his collection. He'd spent more time with it than with me over the past year, constantly tinkering, polishing, and showing it off to impressed colleagues and clients. Now it would fund my fresh start. How soon can you secure buyers? I asked. For vehicles of this caliber? Very quickly. I already have 3 potential buyers for the Cobra expressing serious interest based on the preliminary description. Once we have professional photography completed later today, I can send detailed packets to our most qualified clients. By noon, all 3 cars had been carefully loaded onto the transport vehicle, secured with specialized straps and protective coverings. I signed the necessary paperwork authorizing Damon's company to take possession and act as my selling agent. We'll be in touch within 24 hours with initial offers, Damon assured me. Given the quality and rarity of these vehicles, I expect the total to exceed $2-3 million. As the transport truck pulled away with 3 of Ryan's most prized possessions, I felt a curious lightness. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my power in a relationship where I'd slowly surrendered it over years. Tara squeezed my hand. You okay? Better than okay, I replied honestly. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm driving my own life instead of being a passenger in Ryan's. We were about to leave when a familiar Porsche screeched into Riyadh, the parking lot skidding to a stop inches from Tara's SUV. Ryan leaped out, face contorted with rage. What the hell is going on? He shouted, rushing toward us. I just got a security alert that multiple vehicles were being moved from the garage. He stopped short when he saw the now empty spaces where 3 cars had been parked. Where are they? Where's my Cobra? My Cobra, I corrected calmly. The title's in my name, remember? For insurance purposes. Ryan's face paled. You didn't. Tell me you didn't sell my cars. I sold my cars, I emphasized. And before you start throwing legal threats around, you might want to check the title documents. Your attorney can explain that vehicles titled solely in my name are my separate property, regardless of our prenuptial agreement. You vindictive bitch, he whispered, shock giving way to fury. Do you have any idea what those cars are worth? Approximately $2-3 million, I replied evenly. Though I expect the final offers may come in higher, given current market conditions. Ryan ran his hands through his hair, disbelief warring with rage. You can't do this. Those cars are part of the dealership's heritage collection. Actually, I can. And I did. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Just like you could bring your girlfriend to my birthday dinner. Just like you could buy her my bracelet with company money. Just like you could lie to her about the state of our marriage while lying to me about your fidelity. This isn't about Vanessa, he sputtered. This is about your insecurities. I told you she's just... Save it, Ryan, I interrupted. Barbara sent me the expense reports this morning. 2 rooms at the Olympic Hotel, jewelry classified as client gifts, dinner for 2 at Canley's when you told me you were working late. I shook my head. It's over. Not just our marriage, but the version of me that would have accepted your excuses. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging in painfully. You're not walking away from me or this business. I built Emerald City Motors from nothing. You built it with my inheritance, I corrected, pulling free. And I'm not walking away from the business. In fact, I'll be taking a much more active role from now on, starting with a forensic audit of all financial records for the past 5 years. Tara stepped between us, her expression fierce. Touch her again, and I'm calling the police, Ryan. And I've been recording this entire conversation on my phone, so think carefully about what you say next. Ryan looked between us, seeming to realize he wasn't in control of the situation. His shoulders slumped slightly, and his voice turned persuasive, the same tone he used to close difficult deals. Sophie, honey, we can work this out. Whatever you think happened with Vanessa, it wasn't serious. You know how it is in this business. Sometimes you need to entertain clients, build relationships. It didn't mean anything. It meant something. To me, I replied quietly. Just like it meant something when you dismissed my contributions to our business for years. Just like it meant something when you spent millions on your car collection while telling me we couldn't afford to replace my aging SUV. The cars were investments, he protested. They were appreciating assets. And I'm not? I asked simply. The woman who managed your finances, built your client systems, handled your accounting, and kept your business running smoothly for 12 years wasn't worth investing in? He had no answer for that. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, Ryan seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Michelle Winterbrook will be contacting your attorney later today, I continued. I'm filing for divorce, citing infidelity, which, as you might recall, triggers the special clause in our prenuptial agreement. The color drained from Ryan's face. The 50-50 clause? You can't prove. The security footage from your office says otherwise, as does the company credit card you used to buy hotel rooms 5 miles from our house. As the implications sank in, Ryan's expression shifted from anger to calculation. I'd seen that look countless times when he was trying to salvage a difficult deal or negotiate his way out of a tight spot. What do you want, Sophie? He asked finally. Obviously you're upset. You want to make a point. I get it. Tell me what it will take to fix this. Fix this? I repeated incredulously. You think this is something that can be fixed with a grand gesture or a clever negotiation? Everything can be negotiated, he insisted, slipping back into sales mode. You want a bigger share of the business? Fine. You want the house? It's yours. I'll even buy you a new car, any model on the showroom floor. Tara snorted derisively, but I held up a hand, suddenly curious. Why are you so desperate to avoid the divorce terms, Ryan? The 50-50 split is fair. You'll still have half the business. He looked away, and realization dawned. Unless there's something about the business finances I don't know. Something you've been hiding. His silence was confirmation enough. What is it? I pressed. Tax issues? Hidden accounts? Or is Emerald City Motors not as profitable as you've been telling me? Ryan's jaw tightened. The business is fine. It's just complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me, I demanded. Right here, right now. Otherwise, I'm instructing Michelle to request a complete forensic accounting as part of the divorce proceedings. He glanced around the garage nervously, as if concerned about being overheard despite us being the only ones present. Not here. We should discuss this privately. Tara stays, I insisted. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of her. Ryan sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. Fine. The business isn't exactly what you think it is. Meaning Emerald City Motors is stretched thin. Very thin. The expansion into the new showroom last year, the heritage collection, the exotic inventory, it's all leveraged. Heavily. How heavily? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer given my access to our financial records. We owe close to $12 million in floor plan financing for the current inventory. The Heritage Collection was supposed to be our safety net, appreciating assets we could liquidate if things got tight. He gestured to the empty spaces where the 3 cars had been. which you just removed. I processed this information, mind racing through the implications. So when you said business was too tight to replace my SUV or renovate the kitchen, it was true, he finished. Just not for the reasons you thought. The business looks impressive from the outside, the showroom, the inventory, the client list. But we're operating on razor-thin margins. One bad quarter, one economic downturn, and the whole thing could collapse. And you kept this from me, the CFO of the company? My voice rose in disbelief. Ryan had the decency to look ashamed. I kept some of the financing arrangements, separate, off the main books. You saw what I wanted you to see. Cooking the books of your own company, Tara muttered. Smart move, genius. Not cooking them, Ryan protested. Just compartmentalizing. The business is legitimate. The sales are real. I just took on more risk than I let on. I shook my head, trying to absorb this betrayal on top of everything else. So, our marriage wasn't the only thing built on lies. Ryan reached for me, but I stepped back. Sophie, please, I was protecting you. If the business failed, I didn't want you to feel responsible. Protecting me? I echoed. Or protecting yourself from having to admit you're not the financial wizard you pretend to be. That without me managing the legitimate parts of the business, you'd have crashed and burned years ago? His silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'm proceeding with the divorce. I'm exercising my rights under the infidelity clause. And as co-owner of Emerald City Motors, I'm demanding full transparency of all financial records, including the ones you've kept hidden. Sophie, be reasonable, Ryan pleaded. If word gets out about our financial situation, if our creditors get nervous, it could trigger a cascade of calls on our loans. We'd lose everything. No, Ryan, you'd lose everything. I've already secured my share. I gestured to where the 3 cars had been. Those vehicles were titled solely in my name, my separate property. The funds from their sale belonged to me alone, not the business, not our marital estate. The full impact of what I'd done finally seemed to hit him. So, you get a clean 2. $3 million plus half of whatever's left of the business after the creditors take their pound of flesh. He laughed bitterly. Well played, Sophie. I didn't think you had it in you. Neither did I admitted. But then again, I never thought you'd bring your girlfriend to my birthday dinner, so I guess we're both full of surprises. As we left, Ryan standing in the middle of his diminished car collection, Tara squeezed my hand supportively. You okay? I considered the question carefully. In the space of 48 hours, I'd discovered my husband's infidelity, begun divorce proceedings, sold $2 million worth of luxury vehicles, and uncovered financial deception at the heart of the business I'd helped build. By any normal standard, I should be falling apart. Yet strangely, I felt more centered and clear-headed than I had in years. I'm not okay, I finally answered. But I think I will be. Back at Tara's apartment, I checked my messages to find one from Damon. Initial, offers coming in strong. 3 serious buyers competing for the Cobra. Will update by evening. I forwarded the message to Michelle Winterbrook, adding, also, new development, Ryan admitted to keeping separate books for the business and taking on significant debt without my knowledge. How does this impact our strategy? Her response was immediate. This changes everything. If he's been concealing business liabilities, we can potentially challenge the entire prenuptial agreement on grounds of fraud. Can you document this admission? Tara recorded our entire conversation. At the garage, I replied. He confessed to keeping certain financing arrangements off the main books and admitted the business is over-leveraged. Perfect, Michelle wrote back. And regarding the vehicles you sold, excellent move. Those funds are clearly your separate... property and beyond the reach of both the divorce proceedings and any business creditors. As I set my phone down, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I no longer had a husband. My role in the business I'd helped build was uncertain at best. I had no home to return to, at least not without facing Ryan. Yet, despite all this upheaval, I felt a curious sense of liberation. "What are you thinking?" Tara asked, setting a cup of tea in front of me. "I'm thinking that for 12 years I let Ryan define my value," I replied. "I accepted his assessment of my worth, both in our marriage and in our business. I believed him when he said my contributions weren't equal to his because I worked behind the scenes while he was out there making the deals happen. And now I know better." I sipped my tea, thoughtful. The sad thing is, we could have been great together if he'd seen me as a true partner instead of support staff. Emerald City Motors succeeded because of both of us, his sales, ability, and my financial management. But he could never accept that. My phone rang. Damon again. The call was brief but satisfying. A buyer from Dubai had offered $980,000 for the Cobra, sight unseen except for the professional photos taken, that afternoon. Another from Singapore was prepared to pay $750,000 for the Ferrari Dino. The Aston Martin had 3 competing offers hovering around $600,000. So just over $3 million as estimated, Damon confirmed. "I can have the paperwork ready for your signature tomorrow morning, and funds wired to your account within 48 hours. After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence for a moment. In 2 days, I would have $3 million in my personal account, funds that were legally mine alone, beyond Ryan's reach or that of his creditors. "What will you do with it?" Tara asked when I shared the news. "First, secure my future," I decided. "Set aside enough to buy a new place of my own and establish a financial cushion. After that," I paused, considering possibilities that had never been open to me before. "Maybe start my own business, something in financial consulting or business operations, the work I've actually been doing all these years without the proper title or compensation." My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "We need to talk, really talk. No games, no lawyers. Just you and me. Please." I showed it to Tara, who rolled her eyes. "Here comes the charm offensive. Next he'll be showing up with flowers and grand apologies." "Probably," I agreed, "but it won't work. Not this time." "Because of Vanessa?" Tara asked. "No, because of the cars." I smiled slightly at her confused expression. Ryan never understood that his betrayal wasn't just sleeping with another woman. It was the 1,000 little ways he devalued me over the years. The cars were just the most obvious symbol. Millions spent on his passion while I drove an aging SUV because business was tight. I texted Ryan back, "Nothing to discuss. Lawyers will handle everything from here." His response was immediate. "Sophie, please. I know I messed up. Badly. But there's more you don't know about the business. Things that could hurt you too if they come out during divorce proceedings." My pulse quickened. Was he threatening me now? Or was there something even worse lurking in Emerald City Motors' financials? "What kind of things?" I texted back. "Not over text. Meet me tomorrow. Neutral location. Just 1 hour." I showed the exchange to Tara, who frowned. "Sounds manipulative. Or sketchy, or both." Agreed. But I need to know what he's hiding if it could impact me legally. I typed out my response. "Fine. Coffee at Pike Place Market. 10 a.m. 1 hour only. And if you bring Vanessa, I walk." Ryan's reply was simple. "Just me. I promise." That night, as Tara and I shared a bottle of wine and takeout Thai food, I found myself reflecting on the whirlwind of the past 2 days. From devastated wife to empowered woman reclaiming her value, from bookkeeper to multimillionaire, from supporting character in Ryan's life story to the protagonist of my own. You know what's funny? I mused. If Ryan had just been honest with me about the business struggles, about his feelings, even about Vanessa, we might have found a way forward. It's the lies I can't forgive. Tara refilled our glasses. Men like Ryan don't know how to be honest because they're too busy constructing their image. The successful businessman, the car collector, the guy who traded up for a younger model. She sipped her wine. But you know what? His image is collapsing while you're just getting started. To new beginnings, I proposed, lifting my glass. To knowing your worth, Tara countered. We clinked glasses, and for the first time since my disastrous birthday dinner, I felt genuine hope for the future, a future I was finally writing for myself. Pike Place Market buzzed with morning activity as I navigated through crowds of tourists and locals. The familiar sense of fresh fish, flowers, and coffee created a sensory backdrop to my racing thoughts. I'd chosen this location carefully. Public. Enough to prevent a scene. Busy enough that Ryan wouldn't be tempted to raise his voice. And neutral territory where neither of us held the advantage. I arrived 15 minutes early, securing a corner table at the artisanal coffee shop overlooking Elliott Bay. The sprawling view of water and distant mountains had always calmed me, and I needed that serenity now. Before Ryan arrived, I checked my phone to find another message from Damon confirming the wire transfers were processing. Funds should hit your account by tomorrow afternoon. All paperwork finalized. Financial freedom. The thought still felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. For years, I'd managed millions in business transactions for Emerald City Motors while carefully budgeting my personal spending. Now, I had more resources than I'd ever controlled before, and they were mine alone. I spotted Ryan before he saw me. He paused in the market's entrance, scanning the crowded space with an anxious expression I rarely saw on him. Gone was the confident swagger he typically projected, replaced by a wary vigilance. He'd dressed carefully in the charcoal suit I'd once told him was my favorite. His hair freshly cut, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The image of a successful businessman trying to make a good impression. But I wasn't a potential client he could dazzle with rehearsed charm. Not anymore. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the chair opposite me. Up close, I noticed the shadows under his eyes, the slight dishevelment beneath his polished appearance. He looked like he hadn't slept. 1 hour, I reminded him, checking my watch pointedly. And I'm recording this conversation, so choose your words carefully. Ryan nodded, seemingly unsurprised by this precaution. That's probably smart. He glanced at the second coffee I'd ordered for him, black, no sugar, just as he always took it. A small courtesy that felt like muscle memory rather than kindness. "You said there were things about the business I don't know," I prompted. "Things that could hurt me too if they come out during divorce proceedings." That sounded suspiciously like a threat, Ryan. He winced. "It wasn't meant to be. It's just, there's more going on with Emerald City Motors than what appears in the official books. So you mentioned off-book financing arrangements, excessive leverage." I kept my voice clinical, detached. "What else?" Ryan took a deep breath, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Some of our inventory financing isn't exactly conventional." "Meaning?" "Meaning not all of our creditors are banks or traditional lending institutions." He lowered his voice further. 3 years ago, when we were expanding and the banks wouldn't extend our credit lines further, I found alternative financing. A chill ran through me. "What kind of alternative financing?" "Private investors. High net worth individuals looking for better returns than the market was offering. They provided capital for inventory acquisition in exchange for interest rates, well above what banks were charging." I processed this, mind racing through implications. "And these arrangements don't appear in our official accounting records? The ones I manage?" Ryan had the decency to look ashamed. I kept a separate ledger. The payments go through a holding company that then transfers funds to Emerald City as consulting fees. You created a shell company to hide questionable loans. It wasn't a question. The magnitude of his deception was still unfolding before me. It's not illegal, he insisted. Just creative financing. Everyone in luxury auto sales does something similar. Who are these investors, Ryan? I asked, already dreading the answer. He hesitated. Various individuals, some local business, owners, a few out-of-state collectors, and a couple of foreign nationals who prefer to remain anonymous. Anonymous foreign investors funding a luxury car dealership through a shell company, I repeated slowly. Do you hear yourself? This sounds like a money laundering operation. It's not like that, Ryan protested, though his eyes darted nervously. The money is legitimate. The business is legitimate. I just had to be creative about how we structured the financing. And if these anonymous investors decide they want their money back suddenly, what happens then? Ryan took a long sip of his coffee before answering. That's where the Heritage Collection came in. It was our insurance policy, tangible assets that could be liquidated quickly if needed. The cars in your name were the most valuable pieces of that safety net. I felt a surge of cold anger. So when you titled those cars in my name, it wasn't about insurance benefits or tax advantages. It was to keep them protected from creditors while still having access to them if needed. Partly, he admitted, but it was also because I trusted you. I knew you'd never sell them without discussing it with me first. Like you discussed bringing your girlfriend to my birthday dinner? Ryan flinched. I deserved that. But Sophie, you have to understand, if our investors get nervous, if they start calling in their capital, the entire business could collapse overnight. And with your name on the corporate documents as CFO, you could be implicated in any irregularities that might be uncovered. There it was, the threat beneath the concern. Ryan was suggesting that by pursuing divorce and a business audit, I might be exposing myself to legal jeopardy. How convenient, I observed coldly. You set up questionable financing arrangements, hide them from your CFO, then suggest I might be liable for your decisions. That sounds a lot like coercion, Ryan. It's not coercion, it's protection, he insisted. I'm trying to protect both of us. If we handle this divorce quietly, maintain the business as usual, everything stays stable. But if you push for forensic, accounting, if you trigger a full investigation into our finances, then your house of cards might collapse, I finished. And you're hoping I'll value self-preservation over justice. Ryan leaned forward, his voice urgent. I'm hoping you'll recognize that we built this business together, and neither of us benefits from destroying it. The cars you sold, that was your right. They were in your name, but the business itself is our legacy. Our legacy, I repeated thoughtfully. Interesting choice of words from someone who referred to me as the bookkeeper to his girlfriend. He had the grace to look embarrassed. That was wrong. All of it was wrong. How I treated you. What happened with Vanessa. I got caught up in the image, in being the guy who had it all. The successful business, the trophy girlfriend, the car collection. I lost sight of what was real, which was that none of it would exist without you. His voice softened. You were always the foundation, Sophie, the person who made everything else possible. I just didn't appreciate it until it was too late. For a brief moment, I felt the tug of nostalgia, for the early days when we'd been true partners, for the Ryan who had once valued my contributions. But that person had disappeared long ago, replaced by the man who thought nothing of betraying me personally and professionally. It is too late, I confirmed, my resolve hardening. But that doesn't mean I want to see Emerald City Motors destroyed. Despite everything, it represents 12 years of my life and work, too. Hope flickered in Ryan's eyes. So you'll drop the forensic accounting request? No, I said firmly. But I might be willing to approach it differently. First, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. You're going to provide me with complete access to this shadow bookkeeping system, the shell company, the investor agreements, everything. Sophie, those records are extremely sensitive. Non-negotiable, I interrupted. Either I see everything by the end of today, or I instruct Michelle to include allegations of financial impropriety in the divorce filing. Ryan weighed his options, clearly recognizing he had few. Fine. I'll have everything sent to your email securely. But Sophie, you need to understand how dangerous these waters are. Some of these investors, they're not people you want to antagonize. A chill ran through me. Are you saying they might be dangerous? I'm saying they value discretion and returns on their investment above all else. As long as the business performs and their payments arrive on schedule, everything's fine. But if there's any disruption, then you'd better make sure there isn't any disruption, I replied, starting with full disclosure to me and continuing with an orderly transition plan for the business going forward. Ryan nodded slowly. So you're not looking to destroy Emerald City Motors? Unlike you, I don't destroy things I care about, I said pointedly. The business represents years of my life and my inheritance. I have every interest in seeing it stabilized and restructured properly. Relief washed over his face. That's reasonable. More than reasonable given everything. I'm not doing it for you, I clarified. I'm doing it for myself and for the employees who depend on Emerald City Motors for their livelihoods. People like Melissa and Barbara who have no idea their jobs might be at risk because of your financial games. Ryan checked his watch. I need to get back to the dealership. The Robertson deal is closing today, assuming Vanessa hasn't quit. Has she? I asked, surprising myself by caring. No, she's upset about being misled regarding our marriage, but ultimately she's a professional. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I did tell her our marriage was essentially over. I just exaggerated how mutual that understanding was. And the bracelet? The one I'd wanted for 3 years? Ryan had the decency to look ashamed. That was cruel. I can't explain it except to say that somewhere along the way, I started to resent how much I depended on you. Giving Vanessa the bracelet you wanted was some twisted way of asserting independence. By hurting me deliberately, I translated. Yes. He met my eyes directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sophie. I know I've done too much damage for that. I'm just asking for a chance to fix the business situation before it explodes in both our faces. I considered this request carefully. Despite everything, I had no desire to see Emerald City Motors collapse, taking employees' livelihoods with it. And if Ryan was being truthful about the nature of these investors, there could be real danger in disrupting their arrangements, too abruptly. Send me everything, I decided. Complete documentation of all off-book financing, investor agreements, payment schedules, everything. I'll review it with professionals I trust, and then we'll discuss a transition plan for the business. Thank you, Ryan said, genuine relief in his voice. I'll have it all to you by close of business today. As he stood to leave, I remained seated. One more thing, Ryan. These past few days have made something abundantly clear to me. What's that? That I'm worth far more than you ever gave me credit for, both in our marriage and in our business. I met his gaze steadily. Remember that in all our dealings going forward. A flash of something, regret perhaps, or recognition, crossed his face. I'm starting to understand that, he said quietly, then turned and walked away. I sat alone at the table, watching the ferry boats cross Elliott Bay and contemplating the newest complications in my rapidly changing life. The business I'd thought I knew inside and out apparently harbored secrets that could potentially threaten, Not just my financial security, but possibly my legal standing as well. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. All good? Need backup? Meeting over, I replied. It's worse than we thought. Shadow financing, shell company, anonymous investors who value discretion. Her response was immediate. Holy shutty, coming to get you now. While waiting for Tara, I called Michelle Winterbrook, giving her a brief overview of what Ryan had revealed. This changes our approach considerably, she said, her voice grim. If there are potentially questionable financial arrangements, we need to proceed with extreme caution. You could be exposed to liability as CFO, even if you weren't aware of these shadow books. That's what Ryan suggested, I confirmed. He's sending over documentation today. Once I have it, I'd like you to review it with a financial crimes specialist if possible. Absolutely. I have someone in mind, former FBI financial investigator who now consults privately. But Sophie, her voice turned cautious, if this is as serious as it sounds, you may want to consider some form of immunity agreement before proceeding with full disclosure to authorities. You think it's that bad? I think luxury car dealerships with off-book financing from anonymous foreign investors raise numerous red flags. Best to protect yourself first, then worry about Ryan and the business. After hanging up, I stared out at the water, trying to process how my life had transformed so completely in just a few days. From birthday dinner betrayal to potential financial crimes investigation, it was beyond anything I could have imagined. Tara arrived 20 minutes later, sliding into the chair Ryan had vacated with a concerned expression. Give me the full download. How bad is it? I explained everything Ryan had revealed, watching her expression shift from shock to outrage. He set up a shadow financing system, kept it from you, and now suggests you might be legally exposed as CFO? She summarized incredulously. That's beyond manipulative. That's practically criminal. It might actually be criminal, I admitted. Michelle is connecting me with a financial crimes specialist to review the documentation once Ryan sends it. And you think he will? Send the real documentation, I mean. I considered this. Yes, Ryan's many things, but he's not stupid. He knows I have the leverage here, both with the divorce proceedings and my position in the company. If he sends me fake or incomplete records, I'll know, and the consequences will be worse for him. Tara shook her head in disbelief. First, he cheats on you. Then it turns out he might be involved in financial fraud. What's next? Secret identity? Hidden family in another state? Despite everything, I laughed. I think we've hit the limit of Ryan's capacity for deception. He's just a man who got greedy, for status, for money, for the image of success. The cars, the younger girlfriend, the risky financing, they're all symptoms of the same disease. And what disease is that? Tara asked. The belief that appearance matters more than substance. I gathered my things, ready to leave the coffee shop. Come on, if I'm going to review potentially incriminating financial documents today, I need a clearer head than coffee can provide. We spent the afternoon preparing my temporary home office in Tara's guest room. A laptop secured with additional encryption, a portable printer saw our scanner, external backup drives, and a prepaid phone that couldn't be easily traced. All Michelle's. Recommendations for handling sensitive financial documentation. This feels like we're in a spy movie, Tara commented as she helped me set up. Are the precautions really necessary? Michelle thinks so, and I trust her judgment. I checked. My watch. Ryan should be sending the documents soon. Once I have them, I need to review everything carefully before my meeting with Michelle's financial crimes contact tomorrow. My personal phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. The first transfer from the car sales had arrived. Just over $980,000, the proceeds from the Shelby Cobra. Seeing the balance in my account sent a strange thrill through me. For the first time in my adult life, I had significant financial resources that were entirely my own. not tied to Ryan or the business. What will you do with it? Tara asked when I showed her the notification. Besides legal fees and living expenses, I mean. I considered the question. First priority is securing my future, a place to live, emergency fund, retirement savings. Beyond that, I paused, allowing myself to contemplate possibilities that had never seemed realistic before. Maybe start my own consulting business. I've essentially been running Emerald City Motors operations for years. There's no reason I couldn't do the same for other companies, but with proper compensation this time. Sophie Walker. Business. Consultant. Tara tested the title. I like it, helping other businesses avoid the Ryan Ellis method of financial management. I laughed, feeling a moment of lightness despite the circumstances. Exactly. How not to commingle your legitimate business with shadowy financing 101. My encrypted email pinged with a new message from Ryan. Documentation attached. Password will come by text to your secondary number. Please review carefully and call. If questions. This is everything. The attachment was massive, over 150 MB of files. I glanced at Tara. It's here. This might take a while. I'll make coffee, she decided. The strong kind. For the next 4 hours, I immersed myself in Ryan's shadow accounting system. The documents painted a disturbing picture. A carefully constructed network of shell companies, pass-through entities, and offshore accounts designed to obscure the true source of inventory financing for Emerald City Motors. The structure itself wasn't necessarily illegal. Many businesses use complex corporate arrangements for tax optimization and liability protection. But the nature of some investors and the deliberate concealment from regulatory oversight raised serious red flags. Most concerning were 3 investors who appeared only as numeric identifiers in the documentation, with addresses in countries known for banking secrecy. Collectively, they had provided nearly $8 million in financing over the past 3 years, at interest rates that approached usurious territory, 15% annually when prime lending rates were below 4%. Why would Ryan agree to these terms? Tara asked when I explained what I was finding. The interest payments alone must be crippling. Because traditional lenders wouldn't extend any more credit, I explained. The business was already over-leveraged from his expansion plans and car collection acquisitions. These investors were willing to provide capital when no one else would, but at a premium price. And he kept this from you because he knew I'd never approve such risky arrangements. As CFO, I would have insisted on scaling back, reducing inventory, selling off assets to decrease our leverage. I shook my head, still processing the magnitude of his deception. Instead, he created this parallel financial system and kept me focused on the legitimate side of the business. As I continued reviewing documents, another disturbing pattern emerged. Some of the cars passing through Emerald City Motors, particularly rare models purchased from overseas and quickly resold to collectors, showed significant price discrepancies between acquisition cost and reported sale price. In several cases, vehicles appeared to be sold at break-even or slight losses, which made no business sense, unless the reported prices weren't the actual prices. I think there might be a cash component to some transactions, I told Tara, pointing to a spreadsheet notation that made little sense in context. See this code? It appears on about a dozen high-value sales over the past 2 years. Always exotic, models, always with foreign buyers or sellers. What does that mean in practical terms? It could mean unreported income, or it could mean... I hesitated, not wanting to voice my growing suspicion. Money laundering, Tara finished for me, her expression grim. The anonymous investors put money in, it gets cleaned through car transactions, and comes out looking legitimate. It's possible, I acknowledged, though I need an expert to confirm if that's what's happening here. This is beyond my expertise, even with my accounting background. By midnight, I'd organized the documentation into clear categories and prepared detailed notes for my meeting with Michelle's financial investigator contact. The picture that emerged was troubling. Emerald City Motors appeared to be operating as two parallel businesses, the legitimate luxury car dealership I'd helped build, and a shadow financing operation potentially involved in money movement of questionable legality. And as CFO, my signature was on countless corporate documents, tax filings, and regulatory submissions. The fact that I was unaware of the shadow books might not protect me if authorities began investigating. "You need to sleep," Tara insisted, finding me still at the computer at 1 a.m. "You have the meeting with the investigator at 9. "I know, just finishing these notes." I rubbed my eyes, the strain of extended screen time and emotional stress catching up with me. "I keep thinking about the employees, Tara. Melissa, Barbara, the sales team, the mechanics. None of them know that their jobs might be at risk because of Ryan's financial games." "That's not your responsibility," she reminded me gently. "You didn't create this situation." "No, but I was there. For years, I managed the business finances without noticing the discrepancies that might have revealed what was happening." I closed the laptop, admitting defeat to exhaustion. "I should have seen it." "How?" "Ryan deliberately hid it from you. Created separate books, used shell companies, the works." Tara squeezed my shoulder supportively. "Stop taking responsibility for his actions." She was right, of course. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed in my professional duty by not uncovering the deception sooner. Had I been so preoccupied with being a supportive wife that I'd overlooked my responsibilities as CFO? Or had Ryan simply been that effective at compartmentalizing the business? That night, I dreamed of cars. Sleek, valuable vehicles driving away from me while I tried desperately to catch them, knowing something important was hidden inside. I woke at dawn, the dream's anxiety lingering as I prepared for what promised to be a pivotal day. The financial investigator, James Harmon, met us at Michelle's office promptly at 9. With his methodical speech and penetrating gaze, he reminded me of a surgeon, clinical, precise, and completely focused on the problem at hand. "I've reviewed the preliminary documentation you sent over," he began, opening a leather portfolio. "My initial assessment is concerning, to say the least. The structure you've uncovered bears hallmarks of sophisticated financial obscurement, possibly with intent to conceal the source and movement of funds." "Money laundering?" Michelle asked. "Directly." Harmon chose his words carefully. "I can't make that determination definitively without more investigation. What I can say is that the arrangement creates ideal conditions for such activity, whether or not that was the primary intent." "And Sophie's liability?" Michelle pressed. "As CFO who was kept in the dark?" "Complicated," he admitted. On one hand, the separate bookkeeping system and deliberate concealment supports the narrative that Ms. Walker was unaware of these activities. On the other hand, as CFO, there's an expectation of oversight and due diligence that could be questioned. I leaned forward. What's my best course of action here? I want to protect myself without enabling Ryan to continue these practices. Harmon considered this. 3 options, as I see it. First, you could approach authorities proactively, FBI or Treasury, with what you've discovered, potentially seeking immunity in exchange for cooperation. Second, you could confront your husband and demand immediate cessation of any questionable activities, with the implicit threat of option 1 if he refuses. Third, you could extract yourself from the business entirely as quickly as possible, distancing yourself from any potential liability. Each with its own risks, Michelle noted. Significant risks, Harmon agreed. The first option essentially guarantees investigation of the business, which could lead to charges depending on what's uncovered. The second relies on your husband's cooperation and discretion. The third might protect you personally, but leaves the underlying issues unaddressed. I processed these options, weighing them against what I knew of Ryan and the business. What about a fourth option? Work with Ryan to unwind these financing arrangements legitimately, transition the business to proper banking relationships, and implement transparent accounting practices across the board. Harmon raised an eyebrow. Potentially viable, but extremely difficult to execute without raising red flags. The investors would need to be bought out, which requires significant capital, and unwinding potentially questionable transactions creates its own paper trail that might attract attention. I have capital, I reminded him. Not enough to address all the issues at once, but perhaps enough to begin the process. Using your own clean funds to resolve your husband's questionable financial arrangements, Harmon observed. An interesting approach, though it essentially rewards his behavior. It's not about rewarding Ryan, I clarified. It's about protecting the legitimate aspects of a business I helped build. Employees who depend on their jobs, clients who've trusted us with their business. Michelle and Harmon exchanged glances. It's unusual, Michelle said carefully. Most clients in your position want maximum distance from the potential liability. I'm not most clients, I replied, and despite everything, I still feel responsible for Emerald City Motors. Not for Ryan's poor decisions, but for the parts of the business that operate honestly and employ good people. Harmon nodded slowly. A commendable perspective, though I must advise you that it carries significant risk. If you pursue this path, you'll need to be exceptionally careful about how funds are deployed and how the transition is documented. I understand the risks, I assured him. But I also understand the business in ways Ryan doesn't. He built a house of cards because he was focused on appearance and growth at any cost. I can help rebuild it properly, with solid foundations. Before we proceed with any plan, Michelle interjected, we need to address the divorce proceedings. The financial revelations complicate our strategy considerably. Actually, they might simplify it, I countered. Ryan now has every incentive to agree to favorable terms quickly and quietly. He can't risk a protracted legal battle that might expose his financial arrangements to further scrutiny. Michelle smiled slightly. A fair point. We could potentially leverage this situation to secure an extremely favorable settlement, while simultaneously addressing the business issues. 2 birds, 1 stone, I agreed. As the meeting concluded, Harmon provided me with secure contact protocols and a list of recommended financial forensic specialists who could assist with untangling Emerald City Motors' complex web of transactions. The path forward was fraught with challenges, but for the first time since discovering Ryan's betrayal, I felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival or revenge. This wasn't just about reclaiming my value after being betrayed. It was about rectifying years of financial mismanagement and protecting innocent parties from the consequences of Ryan's recklessness. In a strange way, it was the ultimate assertion of my worth, using my skills to solve problems Ryan had created but couldn't fix alone. As I left Michelle's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Did you review everything? We need to talk about next steps. I replied simply, yes, meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., my attorney's office. Bring yours. The response came quickly. Is that necessary? Can't we discuss this privately first? Those days are over, I texted back. 9 a.m. Don't be late. Tomorrow would begin the complex process of disentangling 12 years of shared life and business. With $3 million securely in my account, expert advisors at my side, and a clear understanding of my own worth, I was finally negotiating from a position of strength. Ryan had brought his girlfriend to my birthday dinner, thinking I would either accept the humiliation or fall apart. Instead, I'd found a resilience I hadn't known I possessed and uncovered truths that had been hidden from me for years. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in recent memory, it was truly mine to choose. Michelle Winterbrook's conference room felt unnaturally quiet as we waited for Ryan and his attorney to arrive. The gleaming mahogany table, reflected the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, while a subtle scent of lemon polish hung in the air. I sat with perfect posture in a high-backed leather chair, dressed in a charcoal suit I'd purchased yesterday, my first significant expenditure from the car sale proceeds. The outfit was armor as much as clothing, projecting the competence and authority I needed for this confrontation. "Remember, let me lead the discussion," Michelle advised, arranging documents with meticulous precision. "No matter what Ryan says, maintain your composure. Emotional reactions give them leverage." "I've spent 12 years managing my emotions to accommodate Ryan's ego," I replied with a wry smile. "I doubt today will be the challenge that watching him introduce his girlfriend at my birthday dinner was." Michelle's lips quirked in appreciation. "Fair point. Just remember we're negotiating from strength here. Between the infidelity, the hidden financial arrangements, and your separate property assets, we hold most of the cards." James Harmon, the financial investigator, sat quietly reviewing notes. He'd agreed to attend as an expert advisor, though he'd warned me his presence alone might escalate tensions. "Having a financial crimes specialist in the room sends a message," he'd cautioned. "It implies potential escalation to authorities if negotiations aren't satisfactory." "That's precisely the message I want to send," I'd replied. The conference room door opened at precisely 9 a.m., revealing Ryan and a silver-haired man I recognized as Edward Griffith, one of Seattle's most prominent divorce attorneys. Ryan faltered momentarily when he spotted Harmon, recognition flickering across his face. Though they'd never met, Ryan would certainly know Harmon's reputation in financial investigation circles. "Sophie," Ryan acknowledged stiffly, taking the seat across from me. "I thought this would be a private discussion." "This is a negotiation," I corrected. "And given the complexity of our situation, appropriate representation seemed prudent." Griffith placed a leather portfolio on the table. "Ms. Winterbrook, always a pleasure. Though I must say I was surprised to receive your call yesterday. I had hoped Mr. and Mrs. Ellis might resolve their differences without formal legal proceedings." "Unfortunately, Mr. Ellis's actions have made that impossible," Michelle replied coolly. "Both his personal infidelity and his creative business practices." Ryan's jaw tightened at the deliberate emphasis. "If we could focus on the divorce settlement without dragging the business into it—" "That's not possible," I interrupted. "Our marriage and Emerald City Motors are inextricably linked, as you well know. My inheritance funded the startup, my work supported its growth, and my signature appears on countless official documents that now carry potential liability given what you've revealed about your shadow accounting system." Griffith looked sharply at Ryan. "Shadow accounting system." "A poor choice of words," Ryan said hastily. "Sophie's referring to some alternative financing arrangements that weren't fully reflected in the main books. Nothing improper. Just complex structures to facilitate growth." Harmon cleared his throat. "As a former financial crimes investigator, for the Treasury Department, I would characterize what I've reviewed as considerably more than complex structures. The deliberate concealment of certain investors, the routing of funds through multiple shell entities, and the suspicious pricing patterns in certain high-value transactions all raise significant regulatory concerns." The color drained from Griffith's face as he turned to Ryan. "You didn't mention any of this when we spoke." "Because it's irrelevant to our divorce," Ryan insisted. "Business operations are separate from marital dissolution. Not when they potentially expose your wife to liability," Michelle countered, "and certainly not when they impact the true valuation of marital assets." I watched Griffith's expression shift from confident to concerned as he realized the negotiation had variables he hadn't been briefed on. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess so I can confer with my client privately." "Of course," Michelle agreed smoothly. "We'll step out for 15 minutes. When we return, I hope we can discuss a comprehensive settlement that addresses both the divorce and business concerns in a way that protects all parties' interests." In the hallway outside, Michelle squeezed my arm. Perfect. Griffith is recalibrating now that he understands the full situation. He's too experienced to let Ryan risk a public battle that could trigger regulatory scrutiny. Ryan looked terrified when Harmon introduced himself, I observed. As he should be, Harmon said quietly. The financial arrangements I've reviewed could potentially trigger investigations from multiple agencies if they came to light through contentious divorce proceedings. When we returned to the conference room, Ryan and Griffith were engaged in intense whispered conversation that abruptly halted as we entered. Ryan's usual polished confidence had cracked, revealing anxiety beneath. After consulting with my client, Griffith began formally, we'd like to propose a settlement framework that addresses both personal and business concerns. Michelle smiled slightly. We're listening. Mr. Ellis acknowledges the validity of the infidelity clause in their prenuptial agreement, triggering the 50-50 asset division. Given Mrs. Ellis's significant contribution to building the business, including her initial investment, Mr. Ellis is prepared to be generous beyond the strict legal requirements. Define generous, Michelle prompted. Griffith outlined an offer. Ryan would retain ownership of Emerald City Motors while buying out my interest at a premium valuation. I would receive the house outright, a lump sum cash payment of $1, $5 million, and ongoing payments representing 10% of the dealership's profits for 5 years. Additionally, Griffith concluded, Mr. Ellis is prepared to assume full responsibility for any regulatory or legal issues that might arise from past business practices, with explicit indemnification for Mrs. Ellis. Michelle made a show of considering the offer, though we'd anticipated something similar. The structure has merit, but the terms are inadequate. My client's financial exposure as CFO can't be erased with mere indemnification, particularly if criminal matters arise, and the business valuation you're proposing significantly underestimates Emerald City Motors' worth. Over the next hour, the negotiation unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Figures were proposed and countered. Terms were adjusted. Legal language was debated. Through it all, I maintained my composure, speaking only when necessary, and always with precise, measured words. Ryan, conversely, grew increasingly agitated. The facade of controlled businessman crumbled further with each concession his attorney made. When Michelle demanded a 20% profit share for 7 years, rather than 10% for 5, he finally exploded. This is extortion, he snapped. You've already taken my car collection. Now you want to bleed the business dry too? I sold cars that were legally mine, I replied calmly. And I'm not trying to damage the business. I'm seeking fair compensation for my contributions and the risks I unknowingly assumed as CFO. Fair? Ryan laughed bitterly. You're sitting there with a financial crimes investigator, threatening to expose everything if I don't capitulate to your demands. How is that fair? About as fair as bringing your girlfriend to my birthday dinner, I replied, my voice steady despite the surge of anger I felt. About as fair as hiding millions in questionable financing while I managed the legitimate side of our business. About as fair as purchasing exotic cars while telling me we couldn't afford to replace my 10-year-old SUV. The room fell silent. Even Griffith seemed taken aback by the rawness of my response. Let's take another short break, Michelle suggested diplomatically. When Ryan and Griffith left the room, Michelle turned to me with approval. That was perfectly played. Emotional but controlled, and it shifted the moral high ground firmly to our side. Griffith knows he needs to close this deal quickly now. She was right. When negotiations resumed, Ryan remained silent while Griffith adopted a more conciliatory tone. The final settlement took shape rapidly. I would receive the house, a $5 million cash payment, 15% of business profits for 6 years, and comprehensive legal indemnification with a funded defense escrow should issues arise from past business practices. In exchange, I would resign as CFO, surrender all claims to Emerald City Motors beyond the profit-sharing agreement, and sign non-disclosure agreements regarding both our marriage and the business's financial structures. By early afternoon, the preliminary agreement was drafted. As the attorneys reviewed language, Ryan approached me while Harmon stepped out to take a call. "You won," he said quietly. "Are you satisfied now?" I studied him thoughtfully, seeing not the charming, confident man I'd married, but someone smaller, diminished by his own choices. "This isn't about winning, Ryan. It's about consequences." "Pretty expensive consequences," he muttered. "Actually, quite reasonable given the circumstances," I countered. "You're keeping the business despite your questionable financial practices. You're avoiding potential regulatory scrutiny. And you're free to build whatever life you want with Vanessa or anyone else." He flinched at her name. "Vanessa resigned yesterday, said she couldn't work in an environment built on deception." "Smart woman," I observed. "She recognized what took me 12 years to see." Ryan's expression hardened. "You know this settlement will force me to unwind those financing arrangements immediately. Some of those investors won't be pleased with sudden changes to our agreement." "That sounds like a problem you created for yourself," I replied evenly. "But if you're concerned about managing the transition, I'd recommend starting with the 3 numbered accounts from the Cayman entity. Based on the transaction patterns, those appear to be your highest risk relationships." Surprise flickered across his face. "You analyzed the transaction patterns?" "I'm an accountant, Ryan. Pattern recognition is what I do." I gathered my portfolio, preparing to join Michelle, who was signaling me from across the room. "One last thing. The next time you set up a shadow accounting system, remember that round numbers in sequential transactions are a red flag for financial crime specialists. You might have avoided scrutiny longer if you'd added some realistic variability." His stunned expression was the final confirmation that he'd never truly appreciated my financial acumen, right until the moment it helped dismantle his carefully constructed facade. The signing ceremony was brief and subdued. As I watched Ryan initial each page of our dissolution agreement, I felt neither triumph nor sorrow, just a profound sense of closure. 12 years of marriage and business partnership reduced to signatures on legal documents, all because he couldn't value what he had until it was gone. "Congratulations," Michelle said as we left her office. "You've secured an exceptional settlement under difficult circumstances." "Thank you for your guidance," I replied sincerely. "I couldn't have navigated this without you, especially the business complications." "Speaking of complications," Harmon interjected, "the separation from Emerald City Motors is clean on paper, but you should maintain vigilance regarding those financial arrangements. Your legal indemnification is strong, but regulatory agencies don't always honor such agreements if they decide to pursue cases." "I understand," I assured him. "I'll be watching the business closely through my profit-sharing reports, and I've arranged for discreet monitoring of certain transactions through a forensic accounting service you recommended." Outside the building, Seattle's spring sunshine broke through the clouds, casting dramatic light across the urban landscape. For the first time in days, I had no immediate crisis to manage, no confrontation to prepare for, no betrayal to process. "What now?" I asked myself aloud, standing on the sidewalk with the settlement documents secured in my portfolio. The answer came with surprising clarity. Now I would build something new, something entirely my own. The funds from the car sales combined with the settlement gave me resources and options I'd never had before. The skills I'd developed managing Emerald City Motors' legitimate operations could be applied to helping other businesses avoid the pitfalls Ryan had created. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "Settlement done? Need to celebrate or commiserate?" "Done," I replied. "Neither celebration nor commiseration, just ready for what's next." "Which is?" she prompted. I smiled as I typed, "Finding a commercial real estate agent. I think it's time to open my own business." 2 weeks later, I stood in an empty office space overlooking Lake Union. The previous tenant, a boutique investment firm, had left the space in excellent condition: polished concrete floors, exposed brick walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows, providing stunning water views. "It's at the top of your budget," the real estate agent cautioned, "and commercial leases typically require personal guarantees and significant security deposits." "I'm aware," I replied, watching seaplanes land on the lake's glassy surface. "But location and presentation matter in financial consulting. Clients need to feel confidence from the moment they enter." "You sound like you've given this considerable thought," she observed. "I've had plenty of time to think about what I want." I turned from the windows, surveying the open floor plan. "I'll take it. 3-year lease with option to renew or purchase." As she departed to prepare paperwork, Tara arrived with coffee and an incredulous expression. "You're really doing this? Opening your own firm just weeks after your world imploded?" "Why wait?" I asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I've essentially been running a business for years without appropriate title or compensation. The only difference now is that I'll be doing it for myself instead of supporting Ryan's ambitions." "And the name?" Tara prompted. "Have you decided?" I nodded, pulling up the logo design on my tablet. "Walker Financial Integrity. Simple, direct, and a subtle message to anyone familiar with my history at Emerald City Motors." The logo featured a stylized W formed from balanced books, conveying stability and transparency. It wasn't flashy or pretentious, just clean, professional, and trustworthy. Everything Ryan's business practices hadn't been. "I love it," Tara declared. "When do you open?" "Officially, 30 days. The time needed for basic renovations, furniture, delivery, website launch, and initial marketing." I sipped my coffee, savoring both the rich flavor and the moment. Unofficially, I already have 3 clients, former Emerald City Motors connections who reached out after hearing about my departure. Tara's eyebrows rose. "They left Ryan's business to follow you?" "They followed expertise and integrity, not personality," I clarified. "Ryan was always the charismatic salesman, but I was the one who structured their financing, managed their accounts, and ensured regulatory compliance. When they heard I was establishing my own practice, they made the calculation that their interests would be better served with me." "That must sting for Ryan," Tara observed with thinly veiled satisfaction. "I imagine so," I agreed, "though he has bigger concerns at the moment. According to my sources, he's been scrambling to restructure Emerald City Motors financing through legitimate channels. 3 major inventory lenders have declined his applications due to existing leverage ratios." "Your sources?" Tara questioned. "You're still monitoring the business?" "Let's just say I maintained certain professional relationships that provide discreet updates." I walked the perimeter of what would soon be my conference room, visualizing the space furnished and functional. Not out of vindictiveness, but self-preservation. My legal indemnification is strongest if Ryan successfully transitions to legitimate business practices. If he fails or reverts to questionable methods, my exposure could resurface. Tara nodded, understanding. "So Walker Financial Integrity's first unofficial client is essentially you." "In a manner of speaking," I acknowledged, though I prefer to think of it as an investment in my peace of mind. The next few weeks passed in a blur of purposeful activity. Furniture was selected and delivered. Technology infrastructure was installed. Marketing materials were designed and printed. Each decision, from the subtly expensive guest chairs to the sophisticated client management software, reflected the business identity I was crafting: professional, transparent, and meticulous. Throughout this period, I lived in a short-term, luxury apartment while my attorney handled the transfer of the house from joint ownership to my name alone. The property held too many memories of my life with Ryan to serve as my permanent home, but it represented a significant asset that I planned to renovate and either sell or rent once the market conditions were favorable. The separation of our shared life continued in parallel with the establishment of my new one. Bank accounts were divided. Joint credit cards were closed. 12 years of accumulated possessions were sorted, with Ryan's items placed in storage pending his retrieval. The process was both practical and symbolic, the methodical dismantling of a partnership that had defined my identity for over a decade. Surprisingly, Ryan maintained a low profile throughout this transition. After our settlement meeting, communication was limited to brief, formal exchanges through attorneys. Whether this restraint stemmed from legal advice, wounded pride, or genuine regret remained unclear. Occasionally, I'd hear reports of him through mutual contacts, struggling to secure new financing for the dealership, working increasingly long hours, looking stressed or tired. I felt no satisfaction in his difficulties, just a detached recognition that consequences were finally catching up with choices made long before he brought Vanessa to my birthday dinner. That public betrayal had merely been the catalyst for revelations that might otherwise have remained hidden for years. 3 days before Walker Financial Integrity's official opening, I received an unexpected delivery, a large arrangement of white lilies with a simple card. "Congratulations on your new venture. I always knew you were capable of more than I acknowledged. R." I studied the flowers, considering their meaning and motivation. Was this a genuine expression of remorse? A calculated attempt to maintain some connection? Or simply Ryan's habitual gesture when he'd caused harm, believing elegant blooms could compensate for substantive failures? After brief contemplation, I placed the arrangement in the reception area of my new office. Not as a sentimental gesture, but as a practical use of quality flowers. Their meaning to me was irrelevant. Their aesthetic contribution to the space was not. The night before my official opening, I hosted a small preview reception for selected contacts who had expressed interest in my services. The guest list included former clients from Emerald City Motors, professional connections I'd made through industry events, and several referrals who'd reached out after hearing about my new practice. The space looked impressive, sophisticated without being ostentatious, professional without being cold. As guests mingled, admiring the views and sampling catered hors d'oeuvres, I circulated with a confidence that felt both natural and novel. This was my business, created on my terms, reflecting my values rather than supporting someone else's ambitions. "Sophie Walker?" A distinguished older gentleman approached, hand extended. "Thomas Richardson. I've heard impressive things about your financial acumen." I recognized the name immediately. Former banking regulator, now chairman of a regional financial services group. "Mr. Richardson, thank you for coming. Your reputation precedes you as well." "I'll be direct," he said after brief pleasantries. "Several of my board members have mentioned your name recently, particularly regarding your attention to regulatory compliance and financial transparency, qualities that are increasingly valuable in today's environment. I consider those foundational elements of financial management, not optional extras," I replied. He nodded approvingly. "A perspective that's refreshingly uncommon. My organization is considering expanding our compliance division to address new regulatory frameworks. We might benefit from a consultant with your specific expertise." By evening's end, I'd scheduled 4 consultation appointments and received strong interest from 7 additional prospects, including Richardson's organization. The reception had exceeded my most optimistic projections, suggesting that my professional reputation had not only survived my separation from Emerald City Motors, but potentially been enhanced by it. As the last guests departed, Tara helped gather empty glasses and straighten furniture. "So," she said, collapsing onto one of the guest chairs, "still think opening your own firm weeks after your divorce was too ambitious?" I smiled, surveying the space that now truly felt like mine. "I think it was exactly what I needed. A clean break, a fresh start, and work that utilizes my skills without diminishing my contributions." "Speaking of your ex," Tara began hesitantly, "I heard something today that you should probably know. My guard instantly rose. What about Ryan? Not directly about him, about Emerald City Motors. She shifted uncomfortably. Apparently, there's a rumor circulating that they're facing a liquidity crisis. Something about inventory financing falling through and existing lenders calling notes due for covenant violations. I absorbed this information with a frown. That's concerning, but not entirely surprising given what we know about their financial structure. Ryan would have had to secure alternative financing quickly after our settlement, and legitimate lenders would have balked at their leverage ratios. You don't seem worried, Tara observed. I thought you'd be concerned about your profit-sharing arrangement if the business fails. The settlement included specific protections against business deterioration, I explained. My profit-sharing has minimum guaranteed payments secured by personal guarantees and specific assets, and the indemnification provisions are structured to strengthen if the business experiences financial distress. Tara shook her head admiringly. You really did think of everything. Not everything, I corrected. Just the scenarios most likely to materialize based on Ryan's established patterns and the business's underlying weaknesses. It's what I do. Identify financial vulnerabilities and implement protective measures. Later that night, alone in my temporary apartment, I reflected on the journey of the past month. From the humiliation of watching my husband introduce his girlfriend at my birthday dinner to the establishment of my own successful financial consultancy, the transformation was almost surreal in its completeness. Yet it wasn't Ryan's betrayal that had catalyzed this change. Not really. It was my response to it. The decision to value myself appropriately after years of accepting less than I deserved. The choice to leverage my skills for my own benefit rather than supporting someone else's ambitions. The determination to build something that reflected my principles rather than compromising them for another's convenience. My phone chimed with an email notification, confirmation of the final transfer from the car sales. All 3 vehicles had now been sold, the proceeds secured in my accounts. The Shelby Cobra, Ryan's most prized possession, had indeed commanded the premium Damon, had predicted, selling to the Dubai collector for just under $1 million. I remembered Ryan's face when he realized I'd sold the cars. The shock, the outrage, the disbelief that I would act so decisively against his interests. That moment had been the first acknowledgement, however reluctant, that I was no longer the accommodating wife who prioritized his desires above my own needs. The birthday dinner betrayal had been painful, but it had also been clarifying, revealing the true nature of our relationship and forcing me to recognize my own complicity in its imbalance. For too long, I'd accepted Ryan's assessment of my value, both personally and professionally. I'd allowed him to classify my essential contributions as secondary, my financial expertise as mere bookkeeping. Now, as I prepared to open my own firm, I understood that the most significant betrayal hadn't been Ryan's infidelity, or even his financial deceptions. It had been my betrayal of myself, the gradual surrender of my worth to maintain a partnership that fundamentally required my diminishment. Tomorrow, Walker Financial Integrity would officially open its doors. Clients would arrive seeking the expertise I'd developed over years of managing complex financial systems. They would pay appropriate rates for my counsel, respect my professional judgment, and value my contributions transparently. The woman who welcomed them would bear little resemblance to the one who had sat stunned in an Italian restaurant just 1 month ago, watching her husband intertwine his fingers with another woman's. That Sophie had been defined by her relationship to Ryan, wife, supporter, facilitator of his success. This Sophie was defined by her own capabilities, choices, and values. The transformation wasn't just professional or financial, it was foundational. I had rediscovered, or perhaps discovered for the first time, what I was truly worth. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. I heard your firm opens tomorrow. Wishing you success despite everything. The industry needs more people with integrity. Vanessa. Ryan's former girlfriend, now apparently former employee as well. The woman who had worn my emerald bracelet to my birthday dinner, unwittingly participating in a betrayal she hadn't fully understood. After brief consideration, I replied, "Thank you. Sometimes painful revelations lead to necessary changes. I hope you found your own path forward." Her response came quickly. "Starting over at a different dealership. Without complications this time. The bracelet is in the mail to you. It should have been yours from the beginning." I set the phone aside, surprised by this unexpected closure. The bracelet that had symbolized Ryan's deliberate cruelty would return to its intended recipient, though I doubted I would ever wear it. Some symbols carry too much history to be reclaimed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the official launch of my business, initial client consultations, the practical demands of entrepreneurship. But it would also bring opportunities that hadn't existed in my previous life. The chance to define success on my own terms, to value my contributions appropriately, to build something that reflected my principles rather than compromising them. Ryan had brought his girlfriend to my birthday dinner, thinking I would either accept the humiliation or crumble beneath it. Instead, I had found a resilience I hadn't known I possessed and created possibilities I hadn't imagined were available. The betrayal that was meant to diminish me had ultimately revealed my true value, not as Ryan's wife or Emerald City Motors' unofficial operational manager, but as Sophie Walker, financial expert, business owner, and architect of my own future. 6 months after opening Walker Financial Integrity, I stood in my expanded office suite watching the sunset paint Lake Union in shades of gold and crimson. What had begun as a one-woman consultancy now employed 5 professionals, occupied twice the original square footage, and served clients ranging from family-owned businesses to regional financial institutions. Success had come more rapidly than even my optimistic projections had anticipated. My expertise in identifying financial irregularities and implementing transparent compliance systems had struck a chord in an industry increasingly scrutinized by regulators. The reputation I'd built quietly supporting Emerald City Motors' legitimate operations had emerged as a valuable asset in its own right, attracting clients who valued substance over flash. "The Richardson contract is finalized," announced Melissa, my executive assistant who had resigned from Emerald City Motors to join my firm 3 months ago. Their general counsel just emailed the signed agreement. I smiled, savoring this particular victory. Thomas Richardson's Financial Services Group represented my largest client to date, a relationship that would not only stabilize my growing firm's revenue, but also enhance its credibility within the industry. "Excellent. Let's schedule the kickoff. Meeting for next week. And Melissa," I added as she turned to leave, "thank you for your work on this. Your understanding of their organizational structure significantly improved our proposal." She beamed at the acknowledgement. "It feels good to have contributions recognized. That wasn't always the case at my previous employer." The irony wasn't lost on me. Melissa was one of 3 former Emerald City Motors employees now working at Walker Financial Integrity. Each had reached out independently after my departure, expressing frustration with the dealership's increasingly chaotic operations and Ryan's deteriorating management style. My desk phone buzzed. "Ms. Walker, there's a visitor here to see you," announced our receptionist. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent, a Mr. Ellis." My pulse quickened slightly. In 6 months, Ryan and I had communicated exclusively through attorneys and financial representatives. Direct contact had seemed unnecessary once the house was transferred, possessions divided, and business arrangements formalized. "Send him in," I decided after brief consideration. Whatever brought Ryan to my office unannounced likely warranted hearing firsthand. He entered tentatively, so different from the confident man who had once commanded every room. His designer suit hung slightly loose, suggesting recent weight loss. The characteristic gleam in his eye, that spark of charm and ambition that had initially attracted me, had dimmed considerably. "Sophie," he greeted me, his gaze sweeping the impressive space. "Your office is." You've done well for yourself." "Thank you," I replied evenly. "What brings you here, Ryan? I assume it's important if you're making an unscheduled appearance." He shifted uncomfortably. "May we speak privately?" I gestured toward the visitor chairs as I closed my office door. "Have a seat." "I'll stand, thanks." He paced to the window, hands thrust deep in his pockets. "I imagine you've heard about Emerald City Motors." "I've heard rumors," I acknowledged. "Financial distress, inventory reductions, potential restructuring." He laughed without humor. "That's the sanitized version. The reality is more like complete collapse. I'm filing for Chapter 11 reorganization next week." Though not entirely surprised, I felt a twinge of sadness. Emerald. City Motors had been part of my life for 12 years, built partly with my inheritance and sustained by my behind-the-scenes work. Its failure, while not my responsibility, still represented the end of something I had helped create. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "What happened?" Ryan turned from the window, fatigue evident in his posture. "Everything you warned might happen. After our settlement, I tried to unwind those alternative financing arrangements, but legitimate lenders balked at our debt ratios. When word spread that we were seeking new capital urgently, our existing creditors got nervous. One called their note, then another, then..." He trailed off, the cascade of financial disaster requiring no further elaboration. "And the special investors?" I asked carefully. "The ones with numbered accounts?" A shadow crossed his face. "They were, displeased with the sudden change in circumstances. Their representatives made it clear that default would have consequences beyond financial penalties." "Were you threatened?" I asked, concern momentarily overriding our complicated history. "Not explicitly, just strongly encouraged to find creative solutions." He ran a hand through hair now visibly threaded with gray. "Fortunately, the FBI's ongoing investigation into luxury car importation schemes has them distracted at the moment." I raised an eyebrow. "FBI investigation?" Apparently, some of our anonymous investors had connections to a larger operation under surveillance. Nothing linked directly to our transactions, but close enough that they've gone to ground temporarily. He attempted a wan smile. "Small mercies." I processed this information, mentally cataloging the potential implications for my legal indemnification. "Does your reorganization plan address the off-book liabilities?" "As much as possible without admitting specific improprieties," he confirmed. "My attorneys think we can negotiate settlements that minimize both financial and legal exposure." A brief silence fell between us, filled with the weight of unspoken realizations. Everything I had feared about Emerald City Motors' financial structure had materialized. Everything Ryan had dismissed as excessive caution had proven prescient. "I didn't come here for advice," he finally said, "or sympathy. I came because you deserve to know about the bankruptcy filing before it becomes public. It will likely impact your profit-sharing arrangement. The guaranteed minimum payments are secured by your personal assets," I reminded him. "Assets that shouldn't be affected by a corporate reorganization." He looked away. "Those assets have been leveraged to secure emergency capital in recent months. The guarantees may be compromised." Understanding dawned. "You used personal property as collateral for business loans against the explicit terms of our settlement agreement." "I was trying to save the company, Sophie. The business we built together." A hint of the old Ryan emerged, the persuasive salesman who could reframe any situation to his advantage. "I thought if I could just weather the immediate crisis, everything would stabilize." "That's always been your approach," I observed. "Short-term thinking, escalating risks, confidence that your charm will somehow overcome mathematical reality." He flinched at the accuracy of the assessment. "I suppose I deserved that." "It's not about deserving, Ryan. It's about patterns. I moved toward my desk, the physical distance reinforcing our emotional separation. You consistently prioritize appearance over substance, growth over stability, and your immediate desires over long-term consequences. While you prioritize caution and control, he countered without heat. We were complementary once, before everything went sideways. We were, I acknowledged. But that balance only worked because I compromised far more than you did. I accepted less than I deserved professionally to support your ambitions. I overlooked warning signs to preserve your confidence. I diminished myself to accommodate your ego. Ryan absorbed this truth without argument, perhaps finally recognizing the fundamental imbalance that had defined our relationship. You're not diminished now, he observed, gesturing to the successful business surrounding us. This is impressive, Sophie. Truly. Thank you, I said simply, accepting the compliment without qualification or deflection. A small but significant change from the woman who had once minimized her accomplishments to avoid overshadowing her husband. I should go, Ryan decided, moving toward the door. I just wanted you to hear about the bankruptcy from me rather than the business pages. And to see how you were doing. As he reached for the handle, I asked the question that had lingered since the night he brought Vanessa to my birthday dinner. Why her, Ryan? Of all the ways you could have ended our marriage, why choose the most publicly humiliating? He paused, hand on the doorknob. I don't have a good answer. Vanessa wasn't the reason our marriage ended. She was a symptom of its failure. By then, I already felt like I was living a performance rather than a partnership. He shook his head ruefully. The dinner was her idea. She thought it would force a clean break rather than prolonging an increasingly hollow relationship. A clean break, I repeated. By ambushing me on my birthday. I told you I don't have a good answer, he admitted. It was cruel and cowardly. The truth is, I was too weak to end things honestly, too caught up in the image I'd created to acknowledge its emptiness. The raw honesty of this admission, perhaps the first truly unvarnished exchange we'd had in years, hung between us like a tangible presence. For what it's worth, he added quietly, watching you rebuild your life these past months has been humbling. You're extraordinary, Sophie. I just couldn't see it clearly when your light was focused on illuminating my path rather than your own. With that, he opened the door and departed, leaving me to contemplate this unexpected coda to our relationship. No manipulation, no charm offensive, just a simple acknowledgement of truths we both now recognized. I turned back to the window, watching boats navigate Lake Union as dusk settled over Seattle. In the reflection, I caught sight of myself, poised, confident, the owner of a thriving business created entirely on my terms. The contrast with the woman who had sat stunned in an upscale restaurant 6 months ago could hardly have been more profound. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. Still on for dinner? I've got news. Absolutely, I replied. Just finishing up at the office. Meet you at Margot's at 7. The trendy restaurant overlooking Puget Sound had become our regular spot for celebrating milestones, both professional and personal. Tonight would mark Tara's promotion to creative director at her advertising agency, an achievement years in the making. As I gathered my things to leave, Melissa appeared in the doorway. Before you go, the real estate agent called about the house. They have an offer significantly above asking price, all cash, minimal contingencies. Wonderful, I replied. Tell her I'll review the details tomorrow morning. The house, my final tangible connection to life with Ryan, would soon belong to someone else. After extensive renovations had erased the most personal aspects of our shared history, I'd listed the property in a strong seller's market. The proceeds would be invested in expanding Walker financial integrity further, perhaps opening a second office in Portland where several promising client opportunities had recently emerged. At Margot's, Tara was already seated at our favorite corner table, champagne chilling in an ice bucket beside her, "You look fabulous," she declared as I joined her. "Success agrees with you." "As does yours," I countered, noting her confident posture and stylish new haircut. Creative director Tara has quite the glow. As we toasted our respective achievements, I found myself reflecting on the twisted path that had led to this moment. The betrayal that had initially seemed catastrophic had ultimately catalyzed the most significant positive transformation of my adult life. "I saw Ryan today," I mentioned casually as we perused menus. "He came to my office unannounced." Tara's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? What did he want?" "To inform me about Emerald City Motors' impending bankruptcy," I explained, "and perhaps to see for himself that I've moved on successfully." "Bankruptcy?" Tara shook her head. "Can't say I'm surprised after everything you uncovered about their finances. How did he seem?" I considered the question thoughtfully. "Diminished. Not just physically, but essentially. As if the effort of maintaining his careful facade has finally exhausted him." "Do you feel anything for him still?" she asked carefully. "After everything?" "Compassion, perhaps," I acknowledged. "Not love or longing. Those faded more quickly than I would have expected. Mostly I feel disconnected, as if my life with Ryan happened to someone else entirely." Tara nodded understanding. "Because in many ways, it did happen to someone else. The Sophie who accepted less than she deserved, who minimized her contributions to protect a man's ego, who drove an aging SUV while her husband collected million-dollar cars. That Sophie no longer exists," I confirmed, raising my glass in a private toast to my own evolution. "To her memory and your future," Tara proposed, "and to unexpected birthday gifts." I laughed at the irony. "You think Ryan bringing Vanessa to my birthday dinner was a gift?" "The greatest one he ever gave you," Tara insisted. "It forced you to see what you'd been accepting and choose something better instead." As our dinner progressed, conversation shifted to future plans, Tara's new role, my business expansion, a potential vacation we'd been discussing. Not once did the subject return to Ryan or the collapsed dealership that had once defined so much of my identity. Later that night, as I returned to the elegant condominium I now called home, I found a small package in my mailbox. The return address bore Vanessa's name. Inside lay the emerald bracelet Ryan had given her instead of me, along with a simple note. "This belongs with you. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." I held the bracelet, admiring its craftsmanship while feeling oddly detached from the powerful emotions it had once evoked. The jewelry that had symbolized such profound betrayal now seemed merely an object, beautiful but without the power to wound. After brief consideration, I placed it in a drawer alongside other mementos from my past life. Perhaps someday I would wear it as a reminder of how far I'd come. Or perhaps I would sell it and donate the proceeds to a women's business initiative I'd recently begun supporting. The decision didn't need to be made tonight. Unlike the woman who had watched her husband intertwine his fingers with another woman's, across a birthday dinner table, I now had the luxury of patience, self-trust, and absolute confidence in my own worth. Ryan had brought his girlfriend to my birthday dinner, thinking I would either accept the humiliation or crumble beneath it. Instead, I had discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed, built a thriving business that reflected my values, and reclaimed the power to define my own value. Some might call it revenge. I preferred to think of it as restoration, the reclamation of worth that had always existed but been too long diminished in service to someone else's needs and ambitions. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a notification. Another client. Inquiry. This one from a major regional bank seeking compliance consultation. The opportunities continued to multiply as my reputation for integrity and expertise spread throughout Seattle's financial community. 6 months ago, watching Ryan casually shatter our marriage at an Italian restaurant, I couldn't have imagined the life I now lived. Financially independent, professionally respected, personally empowered. The journey from betrayal to transformation had been neither simple nor painless, but its rewards had proven greater than I could have anticipated. In the quiet of my bedroom, I spoke aloud the truth that had gradually crystallized through months of rebuilding. Thank you, Ryan, for bringing your girlfriend to my birthday dinner. It was the wake-up call I didn't know I needed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.